Hello, my name's David, and this is the Hyper Thetic RL, a podcast about the what-ifs of rugby league history. You join me for a very special Father's Day episode, and I am going to be joined by the man who introduced me to this great game of rugby league, and still sits next to me when I watch the Mighty Parramatta Eels. How you going, Dad?
I'm very good, thanks, David.
I'm going to refer to you as Dad. I'm not going to give you full name, so it's fine. I was going to... First question I usually ask people when I'm interviewing them is how to become a Parramatta fan. Do you want to tell me that story, or do you want me just to... I suppose you tell me that story and we can talk about it.
I can tell you the story.
Yeah.
It's because your grandfather actually played third grade for Parramatta.
Yeah.
I think he was maybe about the 1950. I'm not sure of the year he played, but he played for them, and he didn't play there for them very long. And then he just sort of told me, well, you should follow Parramatta like any son should follow. Mm-hmm. So I did, even though I lived in the heart of Newtown, which was rather strange.
I know.
But that's why I followed them, and he used to take me along to some, very rarely, but we went to a couple of Parramatta games.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the whole reason I give everyone else is the reason why I'm a Parramatta fan, and they feel sorry for me. I don't know why they'd feel sorry for me. It's the greatest club to support, but it's I've told that story a few times, and we were talking the other day about his older brother as well, who I think we figured out that he actually played for Newtown, his older brother as well. So
yes, he did. He actually played with Bumper Farrell at Newtown.
Yeah,
and he's a bit famous or infamous, and not many people know this, but many years ago when it was his 80th birthday, they had a scrapbook of what his history, basically, because he played football and he was a bit of a bowls player and all that sort of thing. So they had all these clippings, and one of the clippings was a photo of him. I think it was in one of the Sydney newspapers, and it was on the back of the sports page. And he was sitting on top of, I think it was a St George player, and he was playing for Newtown, and it was a grand final. And it said, big headlines, grand final abandoned. And apparently what happened is that in those days, you very much looked after your playmakers, your halfbacks, what you want to call them. And he was the old man in the team because he'd been away to war, and he came back, and they wanted him to play first grade or reserve grade, and he said, no, I'll play third grade with the young blokes. So he looked after the Newtown team. And apparently what had been happening, the St George blokes had been getting stuck into their halfback. So he's had enough of it, and he just took it on himself to square the match up. And there was a giant brawl, and the whole grand final was abandoned.
Yeah, I tried to find some record of that afterwards. I couldn't. It's very hard to find records of third grade.
The only thing I have seen of it is this clipping from the newspaper, and they told me, I've never heard of it before, but they told me that it was definitely abandoned, and that was the reason, and here he is on, with the bloke's shoulders pinned, belting him up.
Yep. And it's nice that it's St George as well, because on this podcast I've talked many times about how St George is probably the team I don't like the most, which is surprising because many people think should be Manly. But and the funniest thing about it, I think I've said this to you before. There's quite a lot of guys who podcast who are St George fans who are the nicest possible people. But yeah, as you know, I grew up next to a family of St George fans, and it was just a little bit too hard to handle.
It is, yeah. And I do hate St George too, because, as I said, when I went to a few football games, one in particular sticks in my mind as a young boy at the Sydney Cricket Ground watching the mighty St George teams. It was way back in the 50s, and I was up in the Sheridan stand watching the game, and we were playing the mighty St George team, and Parramatta had a pretty good team. The end result was 52-0.
Is that the game that you said that you had the footy tab?
Yeah, I had the footy double. I had Johnny Raper, and I think his name was Wright, the guy I had, and Dad said to me, that'll never win.
Yeah.
And Johnny Raper scored the first try. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, I I might win, Dad, because, you never know. Anyway, he wasn't a goal kicker or anything. Anyway, I only had a few minutes to go, and it was, I don't know how many far in front they were. And Parramatta got a penalty pretty well in front, about 20 metres out. And they gave it to this bloke to kick the goal. I don't know why they went for goal. Anyway, needless to say, he went straight along the ground, so I didn't win the double.
That's good. I always loved the footy doubles. One of my favourite memories was a game we went to together. I must have been probably, 12, 13, that sort of time. It was Parramatta was very bad, and we were playing. I can't remember who we were playing, but we had the footy doubles, and you had whoever scored for the other team, and you had the hooker, and the old footy doubles. If you didn't score any points,
you got the hooker.
You got the hooker, And I remember we're sitting there and you're going, it was the weirdest thing I've ever heard you yell at your guy. You're saying, if you're going to score, win the game. Because it was like 8-0 or something. It was a very slow scoring game, or 6-0 or something like that. And I remember you yelling out, like to Parramatta, if you're going to score, bloody win the game. Because you didn't want to lose the money for nothing. And then right at the very end of the game, the hooker scored a try, I think, and we still lost, but he scored the try. So you got your $5. Because we weren't the high rollers, we just did the 50 cents to $5.
I remember that. Yeah, I do remember it. Yeah, it's about the only one I ever won.
And it was weird too, because we had to go to the back of the Parramatta Stadium and wait in this little alcove for all the guys to come down and give them our tickets, so they give us our $5.
That's right. Yeah, because it was run by the junior rugby league, see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they ran the things. Yeah.
I remember we never did any good too. That was the only time we ever won. We were never any good at those, and we'd get one every time. I think I used to keep asking, can we please get a double? And I think after a while I was like, why am I bothering with this? Because we're never going to win it.
Yeah, your chances are probably pretty hard, when you think about it. 13, well, there's now 17, isn't there? 17 times 17, and you've got to get,
Well, I don't know if they do. I don't know how they do it now. I think they might do. Yeah, how do they do it with reserves? I'm not sure. But anyway, I haven't seen footy doubles for a long time. I'm not sure if
I haven't either. Yeah.
But it's part of that. My memory of growing up going to Parramatta Stadium is the footy doubles, and the smell of cigarette smoke makes me think of it. Because it always stank of cigarette smoke, and like it's a great environment for a child. So thanks for taking me along to it.
Introduce you to the real world.
I know, exactly. So obviously, you went to some games in the Sydney Cricket Ground. What was it like, going to a game in the Sydney Cricket Ground in the old days?
Oh, it was fabulous. It really was, because we lived at Newtown, and as you know, I play golf. So when after, I think I was 15, so I would have been playing golf over on the Saturday morning at Moore Park, and I'd have to wait for my father because he'd finish his game of golf, have a few drinks and that sort of thing. So, and then he had to go off and work he had a second job in the pub at night, so I used to have to wait for him, and then he'd drop me at home, and then he'd go off to work. So Saturday afternoon, the football was on, so I used to go out. It didn't matter who was playing. I used to go over and watch the game. And it used to cost me something like 20 cents to get in or something.
Yep.
Because I was a junior, like a kid. And I used to go over there, and I actually went over there one day and saw a World Cup match between Australia and France.
Oh, yeah.
And the place was absolutely packed out, but I got in for 20 cents, so that was all right. And
I don't know what it was packed out.
Yeah,
it's 20 cents.
Yeah, 20 cents. That's all it cost. It's a bit different these days, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know.
But I've seen some fabulous games over there. I mean, back when the heyday of St George, they had Norm Provan, who was as tough as nails. And they used to have these great battles of Western Suburbs. And Western Suburbs had a bloke called Kel O'Shea, and he was as big as Provan and as hard as Provan. And one day there, I was watching the game, and these two, one of them had the ball, and the other one was tackling him, and they head clashed. and they both went down like a rock. And there was no replacements in those days.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway, they both finished the game. But I tell you what, after the head clash, they were wandering around like, you know, these days they'd be off in 2 seconds, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays they'd be straight off.
But in those days it didn't.
Straight away.
You know? And I always, one thing that always stuck in my mind, I used to go over and, believe it or not, I hate to admit this, but I used to enjoy watching Manly play because they were the underdogs.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were playing St George one day, and they were running towards the Randwick end, Manly. They're running towards the Manly thing, and they had a scrum, and it was about 10 metres out from the St George line, and it was over in the corner, over in the left-hand corner. Anyway, they won this scrum, and Manly had this bloke in the back line called McDonald, and he was the Australian beach sprint champion. He was a really, really quick runner, you know. Anyway, they won this scrum, and they went bang, bang, bang out to McDonald, and McDonald took off to the far corner, and that's where I was standing, over in the far corner.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, he's going to score here. And all of a sudden, he disappeared.
Yeah.
And he hit the ground. And who do you reckon got him?
Well,
Johnny Raper from the scrum.
I was going to say playing St George. I'd imagine it would be Johnny Raper. Wow.
It was Johnny Raper, and that's when Johnny Raper was just, I think that might have been his last year or something. He was getting old, you know?
Yeah.
But he came all the way across the field, and he just nipped this bloke right on the ankles and stopped him dead in his tracks. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what a fabulous footballer that is, you know? I mean, as much as I don't like St George, you know, you take your hat off to some of these players. They were fabulous players.
Oh, of course, yeah, and you know, like you can respect a good player and good teams and things like that.
Oh yeah,
you know, I don't think anyone doesn't respect the St George side from that 50s and 60s.
Oh yeah, they had a fabulous team. I mean, they had see, Johnny Raper was a 5'8". A lot of people don't know that, but he was a 5'8". But they also had a guy called Pop Clay.
Yeah,
who was a 5'8".
Yeah.
And he was the dirtiest player you ever come across, but he was as tough as nuts, and he was a little butterball.
Yeah.
But so they put Johnny Raper at lock. Because Johnny Raper was a Newtown junior.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, and he came to St George. They played him at lock. And then, of course, they had a pretty average centre pairing of Gasnier and Langlands.
Oh, yeah, they're no good.
And then they had one winger, Johnny King, and the other winger was Eddie Lumsden.
Yeah, I know.
And Eddie Lumsden was this big bush. I think he came from the bush somewhere, and he was a big, strong bloke. And they used to give him the ball, and he'd just go straight as a dart. You know, he was very, very strong.
Yeah.
And the bloke they had at fullback was some bloke called Graham. He was just average. But back in those days, because there was no tackles, it was unlimited tackles. They used to control the ball, or they get field position.
Yep.
So quite often the fullback would be a bloke that could kick the ball a long way.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying to me once that part of what St George's tactics seemed to be was kick the ball down into the corners and then just tackle them and just bash them until they made
That's what they used to do, and they were terrific at it. They were fabulous. They were absolutely fabulous team. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the only way they broke their run of premierships is they brought in the limited tackles.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what brought them back to the field.
It did. I mean, a lot of people, I think there's a few St George fans think that's probably was intentional, but it was something that happened over in England first. So
they had to do it to open the game up because it was. See, before you came on, you know, I was having a look at some old records from your grandfather's days when he played in the A grade, you know, in the Newtown district and Eastern Suburbs district.
Yeah.
And they'd score in a full season, about 16, 17 games. The most I saw they scored were 230 points.
Yeah.
And for the whole season, you know. But sometimes it was only about 140, 150 points. And games used to be things like 8-4 or that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So it was very much just barge type of thing, you know. And the goal kickers, which he was a goal kicker, they were like gold, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, goal kicking rates nowadays, like an 80% is average or good. You know what I mean? Like anything under 80 is you're not the first, you're not the full-time kicker, or you need to up your game. But
oh, that's right. But the these days it's joke because you know they've got these synthetic balls.
yep,
You have a look. Even when Mick Cronin was playing, and those leather balls he kicked with.
yeah, I know.
Those things were very hard to control. You know.
I mean, luckily I never had to kick with a leather ball. But the one thing that I always point to as well is that when I was doing goal kicking when I was a teenager, we had to kick off sand, and that made it even worse too. So you imagine the leather ball and the sand, because you just couldn't get underneath the ball properly. Like even with the synthetic ball, you couldn't get underneath it properly. So like nowadays it's on a nice little tee and it sits there perfectly.
Oh, that's right.
You know,
well, just going back to when they just have those match of the days. Manly had a fullback called Bob Batty, who was a pretty good goal kicker. And one day there, he had a goal kick from right in front of the post, 10, 15 metres out.
Yeah.
And he kicked the sand.
Yeah, and it just went
and missed the goal.
Nowhere.
And he was a good goal kicker. So it didn't take much for them to miss. But these days, they've got to really miss it to miss the goals, really.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they do kick some sensational goals, but it is much easier nowadays than it was before. I think. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't want to sound like an old man or anything, but I think if you give some of these modern guys a leather ball and kick it off sand, I don't think they'd be anywhere near as good as what they are. But they also do spend a lot of time in the practicing. I mean, these guys that we're talking about all had full-time jobs. You know, they weren't sitting in
that's right.
the park kicking
they
all
did.
the time.
They did. Well, back in those days, what they used to do is one of the incentives for the players was if the first grade team, was associated with a leagues club, and what used to happen is quite often the good players they would entice them to come because they would give them a job as a cellar man or something like that at the club.
Yeah.
Or doing something at the club or whatever, and therefore they had a job. Yeah,
because they had to have the job, but they gave them a cushy job and not an easy job. But
and then they went to training. So they were sort of semi-professional, I suppose. Some of them, but some of them just had jobs. Simple as that.
Yeah.
They used to go to their jobs and then they'd knock off at 4 o'clock or whatever it is, and then they go to training.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what it was like,
Yeah, no, I totally understand, and that was the same right through to the 90s. Like basically until the whole Super League stuff happened, they all had jobs, and pretty much everyone had a job. There was no one who didn't have. They used to have the little thing that would come up on, say, the Channel 10 coverage in the early 90s, saying, it's this player and this was his job, as if they were still trying to justify that people weren't fully professional. I don't know why, but that seemed to be the case. How about we go really far forward? So we've kind of already done it a little bit, but in terms of the modern game as against the game that you remember when you grew up, what's the biggest kind of differences? And do you think that it's a better game now than it was before, or do you think it was a better game at a different point?
Well, I think the biggest difference is the fitness levels, because they can train so much more now. They can concentrate on their fitness. They don't have to worry about their jobs so much.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I find is the ball, because if you have a look at some of the games back in the 80s, and they were using the leather ball, I mean, if it got a little bit wet, it was incredible. I mean, some of the skill they had to do to control that ball was unbelievable, because it was just so hard. And the condition of the grounds, look, these days we see them play and it's sort of on a beautiful manicured field. You have a look at some of the older games, particularly at the Sydney Cricket Ground. If it rained, it's mud. They'd play in mud. That was it. So it was all just a lottery as to what would happen. So I think that's the difference. I mean, A, the fitness, and B, the balls, and three, the condition of the grounds. But it's very hard to compare because, I mean, the game's played a completely different way these days to what it was then. If you have a look at particularly when Parramatta had that good run in 81 through to 86, if you have a look at the way they structured their attack, it would go half 5'8", centre, winger. Mm-hmm. You don't see that anymore. You now have a second rower stuck in there somewhere.
Yeah, they play two sides of a field now, and there's some
it's a
players
different game altogether.
That's right. Some players can't play on the other side of the field. They just can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, physically, if you look at a game these days, this you'd have to say, well, I would say that the more modern game is they've got more skill, particularly the wingers, right? But you've got to remember that back in say the 80s and even the 90s. The corner post was deemed out. Mm-hmm. So some of these tries they're scoring these days, where they're diving in and they hit the corner post, but they don't go into touch because their feet don't go into touch, and they put the ball down. Back in the 80s, and even I'm not sure if it was the 90s or not. If that happened, the guy was in touch because he hit the corner post.
Yeah.
So the rules have changed too, which makes it a little bit, it makes it a bit different. But I'd have to say the modern game is more skillful, and it's much better to watch because of the, some of the things they do. But they have big advantages. I mean, it's like any sport. You got technology, and they're just not synthetic balls. They've been tested and whatever to do certain things, and they're easier to grab, and they put all that stuff on their hands, to help them grab the ball and all that sort of thing. But it shows it. I mean, it shows the game up better.
Yes.
But I still think the guys back in the 80s and even before that, they still had fantastic skills.
Oh, of course, but
it's a different game. You can't. It's very hard to compare because, I mean. I look at some of those old games and I think to myself, oh my God, they're scrappy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but sometimes you'd see things and oh, geez, he did well to do that, because you know yourself. If you as a young person, if you played football and you played with those leather balls, you just know how bad they were. It got a little bit wet and that was it.
I didn't have to do that, which was fantastic. We had synthetic balls. The funny thing about the balls now is that they're talking about. I did see something recently about possibly having a different ball for nighttime football that has the those dimples.
Yeah, because they're saying it's too slippery. Yeah,
so it would make it like it's a dry game at night.
Yeah, well,
like I don't know. I mean, but ball technology is good. But the other one too is they're talking about having the NRLW, the women's competition, and giving them smaller balls than the guys have so that they can grip it in their hands better because they've got smaller hands.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably a thing, but then again, you don't know if you got a smaller ball, when you kick it, what happens to it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's sort of, it's a bit hard. It's a bit like the junior league, isn't it? Because, yourself, because when the little kids play, they play with a smaller ball, don't they?
Yeah, and they don't really kick the ball in the juniors anyway, so that doesn't really make a difference.
That's right. Yeah.
So talking about evolution of the game and the very, very modern history, or the very, very modern game at the moment, what do you think about these? I know there's a lot of people online don't like the six again rules and the blowouts that are happening. What do you think about those sort of things?
Well, initially I was in favour of that because I thought to myself, I mean, okay, let's keep the game going, give them a six again, blah blah blah, Yeah. But then they started all this business about they kicked the ball deep, and to make sure their line was set, they'd hold the bloke down and give them an extra tackle, right?
Yeah.
And there was no penalty. Now, the other day we were watching a game. It was who was it? It was someone against the Roosters last week. Mm-hmm. And dead set, that Crichton bloke, he was about 5 or 6 metres offside, deliberately offside.
Yeah.
That's right, it was the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. The Cowboys were coming to get him. And they, in 3 tackles in a row, they were just deliberately offside.
Yep.
Deliberately offside.
Yeah, and it's not just the Roosters, it's every team does it.
Oh, no, I'm not just picking on them, but that's just an example. And they had it on the TV the other day saying about it. Now, in my view, if someone's deliberately offside, you shouldn't be waiting 3 times to do it or 4 times to say you get in the bin or whatever.
Yeah.
If someone was deliberately offside, that's a professional foul in my view. Straight to the bin.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that I think when it's an infringement inside your own half, I think it should still be a penalty.
Yeah.
Because if they can kick the ball 20 or 30 metres and then get the 6 tackles, they're getting the advantage. Whereas at the moment, the defence gets the advantage because they hold them down. Okay, they give away an extra tackle, but their defence is set.
Yeah, and
So
I think they've lost. I think what they've done is they've lost the reason for why they want to do this.
Yeah, they've worked out a way around it. That's what it is. They said they would because you listen to the commentators and they said when it came in, I said it won't take the coaches long to work it out.
Oh no, it hasn't.
And it hasn't taken them long.
Yeah.
And some are better at it than others.
Well, you look at the teams that, I mean, we're going to date this podcast because this is going to come out around Father's Day, but at this point we're in July, and you look at the teams that are at the top of the ladder, and I mean, I know they're very talented teams as well, but if you look at, the tacticians, you've got, Wayne Bennett and Craig Bellamy are 2 of the coaches.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree.
They're very good tacticians, and they know, they work this stuff out. And, I just wish that our team would adapt as well as some of the other teams do sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's difficult because you asked me what do I think of the 6 again. Okay, well, I think it's a good idea, but I think in a way the refs have been inconsistent as well because at the end of that game on Friday night when the Raiders were playing Parramatta, Parramatta had the ball close to their try line and Hodgson had his hand on the ball, wouldn't let the bloke play it, moving his hand around and whatever, and pretending to be caught up, but he wasn't, Yeah. And the referee doesn't give them 6 again. Yet another incident happens, and all of a sudden it'll be 6 again. You think, well, why did that happen?
Yeah.
It's very, very hard to work out. I can understand them when they say, there weren't 10. They just say ruck infringement. Yeah. I don't even know what ruck infringement means half the time because sometimes the guy will get up to play the ball, the defender will do absolutely nothing, but the guy that plays the ball falls down and the referee sees, we touched him, 6 again.
Yeah, it's a lot of play acting as well.
It's ridiculous, So I reckon that I think the answer would be penalty inside your own half, and if it's not inside your own half, you get the 6 again. I think that's what it should be.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, we'll stop talking about rules before we upset anyone who's a referee. I think I asked you this question when we first talked about doing this. Who's the best player that you've ever seen play?
Oh, gee, that's very hard because, as I said, the rules change over the thing, but and it's debatable who's. I've always loved watching Brett Kenny play. Mm-hmm. I thought he was a fabulous player and had tremendous ability to be able to read a game. And he took that many intercepts you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So they're not by fluke. He knew what he was doing, and he had a beautiful dummy, and he was a lot quicker than people thought. So I would say, even though a lot of people say, Sterling's very clever and whatever, which he was, but I still think Brent Keddy was a terrific player. But even going back to those fabulous St George teams, I mean, they had a bloke in the centre called Reg Gasnier.
Yeah.
And he was just quick, just so quick, and he had side steps and whatever. But so he was a fabulous player. So it's hard to say who's the best player you've ever seen. You could probably say, okay, maybe the 60s. You might say someone like Gasnier or Raper, and then you move. I think you'd have to go by, maybe in every decade or something like that.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a Parramatta supporter, I think the best player I've ever seen is Brett Kenny.
Yeah.
That's just my personal view. But someone would say to me, he wasn't as good as this and good as that. But if you ever listen to what they ever talk about, they reckon the best player, best state of origin players, Wally Lewis.
Yeah.
But who controlled Wally Lewis? Brett Kenny.
Yeah.
He outplayed him every time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I know.
you know, what do you do? You know, sort of, yeah, but, you know, big match players, that's what I suppose they are.
That's right. And look, I think we've said this already, point to the fact that Wally Lewis is an immortal and Brett Kenny isn't for some unknown reason. And
Well,
up until
that's
recently,
beyond me.
well, up
Because
until recently,
State of
Brett Kenny
Origin
wasn't
came
even
in,
in the...
And look,
Yeah.
he was a tough man, a good player, very clever.
Yeah.
And he had a will to win. That was great. I'll give him credit for that. But I think they blow him up a bit and as if he's better than he actually was, really.
It's for the Queenslanders, that's what it's for.
He went to South West Queensland, didn't he, and did nothing.
Yeah.
He played for the Crushers.
No, he played for the
Was it
Seagulls.
the Titans or something?
Yeah, no, he played for the Gold Coast team.
Yeah. He played for them.
Yeah.
And when he went there, he was no good.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, Brett Kenny played in a Parramatta team that had no stars left in them, and you know he still turned up every time and played well.
Exactly. And he played with busted shoulder at the end, so you know, I felt sorry for him at the end because everybody else had retired and he ended up with a bloody busted shoulder or something, and he couldn't do anything.
And he ended up playing in that '90s Parramatta team that was not very good.
No.
Although
but I don't worry about that.
No, look, I say to people, I still have fond memories of all those names, of all those like early '90s Parramatta players. You know, I remember them all, and I remember thinking how great, you know, watching them play was. But now I look back at it, and I'm like, geez, these guys, there was some rough players there. There was some very bad players in that team.
Well, if you have a look at some of those games. How Ray Price ever lived, I'll never know. Because, Peter Kelly from Canterbury used to try to kill him every time. Mm-hmm. And, it was amazing. And how the guy ever kept going, I'll never know. Because I saw him play when he used to play for Rugby Union for Parramatta. And even though I didn't really follow Parramatta Rugby Union, I thought to myself, he's a fabulous player. When we signed him to play league, I thought, well, this guy's going to be fabulous.
Yeah.
And he was just so tough. They could hit him with an axe and he'd get back up again. You know, he was such a tough player.
That's right.
But that's what it was like then. You know, every team had them. I mean, that Canterbury had that guy, Robinson. He used to come, they talk about coming from the back fence. I think he came from 3 back fences back. He used to run so hard, that bloke, you know. But that's what they did, and how they ever survived, I don't know. Because in those days, they used to hit them high, I can tell you.
Oh, yeah, you watch some of those old things you watch some of those games from the 70s, and it's just, wow. And even the early 80s, I mean, you know that the game before the grand final, Parramatta's first grand final in 81, I think it was, Newtown and Manly, and that was basically a massive fight.
That game, yeah. That was a bluer from that one. Yeah, they were tough. Geez, they were hard. Not geez, they gave it to each other. Oh my God! I mean, these days they'd have 4 or 5 set off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you throw a punch, you're off. That's it.
But that's just the way it was, you know. I mean, I'm harping back a little bit, but going back when I played as a junior, this is a long time ago, that would have been early 60s. I had a mentality one day, we were playing a team. I wasn't supposed to be playing because I was 6 days too old, but I was playing and our side was hopeless. But they had this big bloke and I said, I'll take care of him. Anyway, he come running up at me, so I put the big stiff arm out and hit him in the head. And he kept running, and I had a sore arm. But that's what that was the mentality of the whole thing. That's what we were brought up on.
Because you played in the weight and age one, didn't you? Where you had to be a certain
you had to have a weight and age. That makes me laugh these days when they talk about big kids.
Yeah.
And I wasn't big boy, but to play in my age group, I had to actually lose a pound or 2 before each game, and it was. Like I can remember running before doing the weights, running around the local oval to try to, lose a little bit of, just a little bit pound here or there. And so we only played against people that were similar size. You might have thin blokes that were tall or something like that.
Yeah.
But no great weight things, you know. And that suddenly stopped. I don't know when they stopped that, but that to me that would be the answer.
Yeah,
and they're talking about okay, you're a year, if you're a year older, but you're lighter, you could play. Maybe you could play with the younger blokes, because they're not as big as you, or they're not as big as the other blokes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they went away from it. I don't know why they went away from it, but I know that it'd be a lot harder nowadays because there's lots of people with, Islander heritage that they're just big kids. And if you start making them play up age divisions, I think that would be... I mean, I understand what you're saying. Maybe if you're a smaller kid, you can play down a division. Maybe that would be a better way of doing it. Because they always say to them, it's like, you got like an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old boy he's just a big kid, he's really big.
Yeah, that's right.
If you make him play up so he's playing with 11-year-olds, he's not going to be developed enough to do that.
No, that's true. That's the reverse, of course, But anyway, I don't know if there is really an answer. As you know yourself, when you were playing them and big blokes are in there, and you think...
Yeah, but I didn't have that. Like, we didn't have... I mean, there were big guys. Fair enough, there were bigger guys than I was. But I don't think it was as much of a difference as it is now. Like, because you remember I refereed, 15 years ago it was now. It was happening then, like that, and that was like 10 years on from when I'd finished playing. And like the massive difference in the size of kids. Like I don't remember kids being the same size as what they was. I was not the biggest kid, but I wasn't the smallest. But I'd be the midget, small little kid in some of these teams. Like too much hormones from the kids or something. But
they lose their birth certificates.
That's true. That's very true. The other one, because you're talking about when you played as a kid, because you used to play full field as well, didn't you?
Oh yeah. And see, do you know the origin of the word dummy half?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I don't know if everybody knows this.
How about you do? How about you tell everyone, because that would be helpful.
When there was unlimited tackles, so that they didn't want people running from dummy half all the time, or from the play the ball. The rule was that if the person that took the ball from the play the ball, if they didn't pass it and they got caught in possession, your team lost. There was a scrum.
Yeah.
And so that's why they called it dummy half, because you were actually acting as a half and picking the ball up, but you're a dummy because you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
But some smart blokes, like some dummy halves, would, if they got close to the try line, they'd take the gamble and they'd go for the try.
Yeah.
Or they'd go for a bit of a run and then try to offload and that sort of thing. But if they didn't offload, they'd lost the ball. So that's where it all came from, dummy half,
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a dummy half in my schoolboys, and I scored a few tries from dummy half.
Yeah.
But you had to be mindful of the fact that if you were going to get tackled, get rid of the bloody ball. Otherwise, your team lost the ball.
Yeah,
that's where it all came from.
They still do that in juniors now. Like I don't know. I think they've changed the rules again since I've finished refereeing. But they used to have the thing where you had to have the 2 passes and all that sort of stuff, which is trying to encourage them to pass the ball. And
I understand why they're doing that. But that's where it all came from. But it was all because of the fact that you had the unlimited tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And if otherwise you'd pick the ball from the play the ball and go forward a metre. A bit like rugby union. When you see rugby union and they have those rucks.
Yeah.
They do. The bloke picks it up and then goes forward, and very boring stuff, isn't it? When you look at it like that.
We don't want to talk about rugby union on this podcast.
Yeah, but I'm just sort of saying that because that's where the game came from, rugby union. See, rugby union, and then league came from that.
And like you said, the rules changed. I mean, in the early days of rugby, before it sort of became, like when it was over in England and stuff, they were still playing rugby union rules for quite a long time. Like I think the play the ball only came in a few years before we started in Australia. Like it was.
Yeah, probably was. I don't know the story on that, but yeah.
Well, I looked up. There was a game. It's interesting what you say about the amount of points in a season, because I remember looking up it was like a season in the English game, and it was probably around the turn of the century. And the amount of times that the score was like, 3-1 or something, or ridiculous scores like that, and that's, no one scored. Like there was just it was very, very rare to score any points. And you know, so much.
But that's what it was like. See, and that's why the goal kickers were seen. See, your grandfather was only 9 stone 7 rig and wet, but he could run, and he could goal kick.
Yeah, exactly.
So they stuck him out on the wing.
Yeah,
and then when they got the penalties, he'd come in and kick the goals.
Yeah.
So he was like gold. Blokes were like gold because they were in. The old Keith Barnes was like that.
Yeah.
He was never a great footballer, but he was a fabulous goal kicker. And you have a look at some of the history of Balmain, and you'll see how they've won the game, and it's all through Keith Barnes. They called him Golden Boots.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he was that good, you know.
Exactly. Well, see, that's only because I didn't get to play in first grade before he did, because I was.
Oh,
so
is that
good.
what it was? Okay. I retired too.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We both retired on a high. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I retired winning no grand finals, but that was fine.
Oh, well, never mind. I never got to any of it. No, I only ever played the schoolboy stuff. You know, that was it.
No, that's true.
Yeah. We won a premiership. Well, we won the I think it was in year 6. I think might have been that we won. But in those days, we had a guy that played lock and a guy that played 5'8", and in all the schoolboy games, they scored all the tries, bar about 5 or 6, and I scored those. Yeah. But they scored, 30 or 40 or something like that. Because what you do is you give it to that bloke who had the bit of skill and run, and they'd run through in school, and we happened to have 2 of them in the team, and that's why we won.
Well, that's all you got to do. Just have to have the best players.
Yeah, that's what it was like then, But yeah, that's going like 10, 11, 12-year-old kids,
Yeah. No, definitely. So I got another cheeky question. Will you ever forgive Neville Glover?
I don't. Well, it's funny you say that because it turns out that he was probably a bit unlucky because I don't think the pass was the best.
No, and I've told you to look at that again.
Everybody thought, "Oh my God, how could he possibly drop that ball?" But never mind.
Exactly.
I'm sure he lives with it. I mean, I remember going.
The Golden
I don't know if you went. If it was you or your sister that we went to the game, and they used to have the old
the Golden
come out and
Oldies.
play.
Yeah, the Golden Oldies. I remember that. That was me. Yeah.
And I remember one time there, Glover came out. He had a pair of those bloody hands on, the giant hands.
Yes, the big
this is a comedy there, because it became a big joke, at the time. I mean, I'm sure that, it happened, but, what the hell? It's just one of those things.
I know.
You can't say that cost them the game because other things might have happened during the game that cost them anyway.
Well, so, I'm really thankful that I got all those years, and we're still doing it. Like, if we're ever allowed back in the stadium again, I'm still going to sit next to you and still talk about it. But I'm really thankful that as a kid, we sat there in that ground, and you would tell me these things. You'd tell me about these games, and because I didn't know, like, they'd have like the players come around and. It was like, oh, look, that's John. That's John Colk. I'd be like, I have no idea who that is. Never saw him play, but you'd tell me about him, and and nowadays it's so much better because I can go onto YouTube and I can find some of these old games. And so last year I found the 1976 Grand Final in full. And I watched it, and I think I did tell you about it. And I watched that pass, and he is very unfairly persecuted. Paul Neville Glover. That pass was terrible. He had no chance of catching that.
And you got to remember that he was running at full pace.
Yeah, and even if he caught it, I don't know if he scores. But in about, I think it's about, because that's still with 10 minutes to go, at least 10 minutes to go. There's another point later in the game, and I think it's Ray Higgs goes through. Everyone who's not Parramatta fans is going to listen to this and go, I don't really care, but it doesn't matter. Ray Higgs goes through, clean break, and he comes up to the fullback, and he doesn't actually look for support. He just tries to take him on and get to the line, and he doesn't get there. And what he hadn't realised is the centre, and I'm trying to think who the centre was that day.
I can't remember.
Mark Levy, I think it was.
It could be.
I think it was Mark
could
Levy.
have been. Yeah, because
he had run back on the inside to support. If he just draws and passes, Levy goes in under the posts, and we win the grand final because it was in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and so I think that one's. I mean, I'm not going to deride Higgs because he's another Parramatta legend. It's one of those things where I remember from when I was a kid, I only got to see Eric Groth very, very rarely because he was sort of injured or not really playing, or he'd come out with number 52 on his back or something. Like he wasn't much of him. I got to see Sterling and Kenny. And I was too young, like Ray Price had already retired and Cronin had already retired, and I didn't really see Ella, or there's a lot of these players I didn't see. The people I remember were the ones that were in the teams that weren't so good. So it's good to hear about these guys in the 70s because they don't get any credit. So
it's interesting because the secretary manager of the golf club, his son played for Parramatta.
Yeah.
And he's friends on Facebook with quite a few of those blokes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll see, because I'm friends with him, and sometimes I'll see the things, the comments they make about the players, and I see who he's thinking. I thought, well, he sort of knows them all, and they're all good mates.
Yeah.
And he became friendly because his son played for Parramatta.
Yeah.
So obviously these blokes hung around watching the young blokes play. So they don't just disappear into it's like any club. They don't disappear into the wilderness. They hang around the club, and you don't know. It's quite interesting, really. And some of the names that I see there, I think, hey, who's that bloke? And then I say, oh, that's right, he played. And you sort of forget their names because they're not superstars. But they were quite good footballers.
Well, they were. Well, I mean, the Parramatta in the mid to late 70s were a good team. Like we were right up there every time. There was opportunities on a few occasions, and even the ones we didn't make grand finals, there was opportunities that we could have done something. But just the witch kept taking it off us, I think.
Yeah, I'll tell you something I've never told you, and it's true that when Parramatta signed Jack Gibson as coach, I thought, one of the most hopeless signings ever.
You have told me that. Have
I told you that one?
Yeah, when you told me that. And
I take it back now.
No, look, this one's even worse, because when you told me that was when we signed Michael Hagan as coach.
Oh, okay.
And you said to me, because I said to you, this is a terrible signing, and you went, oh, you know what? I thought the same thing when we signed Jack Gibson. Yeah, and I was wrong.
Wasn't I proven wrong there?
And you're proven wrong with Michael Hagan, I'll tell you that. What
a fabulous coach he was, Jack Gibson. Unbelievable coach.
Yeah, Jack Gibson for sure. I mean, look, we talked about Bennett and Bellamy, but, Jack Gibson, the original super coach, really. I suppose Harry Barth as well, but,
You only have to listen to some of the things that Peter Sterling says. And when they refer to Jack Gibson.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, well, yeah, he knew how to pull them into line, you know what I mean? And he let them do their own thing at times, but he must have been a fabulous coach. But he had a guy with him called Ron Massey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Ron Massey was sort of like, he was the early, these days, you got defensive coach and attacking coach. So I think that he was like that. He was sort of, he's Jack's assistant, and he probably had a lot of input into what went on in the team,
Yep. Yeah. Very famous Ron Massey's got the cup named after him now too.
Yeah, so, that's right. Yeah. You wouldn't know. I mean, he was just like the backroom man, Yeah. You never hear much about him, but he must have had a lot of influence, I think, with Gibson.
Well, I mean, you look at the coaching. I did do, and don't know if it's ever going to be released, but I did sort of do a bit of recording, send to someone about, my favourite all-time Parramatta 17, and I didn't name a coach, but there's no other coach you could possibly ever name as your best Parramatta coach. There's been some other good ones, I suppose, but Jack Gibson is just without him, we've only won one grand final. So
well, that's true. But then again, of course, I suppose you got to look at it that the blokes that he had, or the young blokes that came through, is he was lucky in relation to that. I mean, he had Sterling and Kenny and and growth. And then he went and he took Cronin into coming up from Gerringong every day, every training day to train and whatever. So but he moulded the team, and that's where the coach does. If the coach moulds the team, the skill level comes out in the players, and that's what happened with them. You know, It's like any club. I mean, it's a bit. That's what Bellamy does, I think. Bellamy gets those blokes there. Look at the blokes that have gone down there to play for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they leave there and they go somewhere else. They're not as good.
No,
because
exactly right.
It's the coach that does it, and they're just not there as a word coach. They actually manage the players, and sometimes it's a psychological thing they manage.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's finish with the current state of Parramatta, because that's what we love to talk about. So, I mean, I know no one gives us a chance this year because Melbourne, Penrith, and South are all too good. How much chance do you give us this year and the next few years?
Well, I'm always optimistic about it.
You are, and it's really terrible because I'm the pessimist, and it's really hard when we discuss this.
I'm very optimistic, but on their day, I think they can beat anybody, because going back to the Jack Gibson situation, if you have a look at the forward pack that played in those grand finals, they had some good players, but they were just a unit, a hard unit.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Parramatta's got at the moment, a hard forward unit.
Yeah.
And that's one of the keys to going well. And to me, if things go right, the young hooker, I think I can't believe how good he is. I didn't think he was that good, but I think he's going to be a real star in the future, that young hooker.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I still have a lot of faith in Dylan Brown, and I think Moses can play brilliantly, and Gutherson just works his bum off. So, going on that, the big weakness to me is in their centres.
Yep,
I
definitely.
think Opacek is going to be a good buy. I thought he was at the time. And I'm a bit reserved on Wacker Blake, but I quite enjoyed watching that young bloke play on Thursday night.
Panisi, yeah.
I thought he had a really good game. He made a couple of errors, but he looked like he was off to do things. So I'm optimistic, but the realist in me says, no, we won't win. But I'm optimistic, and if we win, I'll be very happy.
So will I. And I think that's all that matters in the end of the day.
I suppose I'm the typical Parramatta supporter. Live in hope.
Well, look, there's always the joke, most of the Parramatta fan base have never seen them win a grand final. Look, you and I both have. So, I mean, I was 6, so I don't remember it, but I was alive at least.
Yeah.
But we'd really love just for the younger generation to experience it once. We only want one. We're not going to be greedy. We're not going to want 2 or 3 in a row this time. Yeah. Just give us one, and then we'll go on our way for the next 10 years or something.
And of course, the ironic thing of all that is that your sister actually used to go to the football with me, and she saw all the great times.
Yeah, I know.
She's got no interest in football at all.
I know. She saw the good ones, and then she stopped going. Maybe we should get her to go again, because that might be.
I tried that. No, she's not going to.
Fair enough. Look, I figure if you're a Parramatta fan, that growing up from my generation of Parramatta fan, you learn about what disappointment and heartache is, and it just prepares you for real life.
Yeah, I just accept it. I just accept it.
At the end of the day, it's just a game.
They win.
Doesn't matter, but it'd be great to win one just to finally get over that hurdle, because it's getting a little bit. It's becoming notorious now how long it is.
Oh yeah, but I don't take any notice of that, because things come and go, and you just got to be lucky. You got to be lucky. At the moment, the Storm and the Panthers, they look almost unbeatable, don't they? Really, but you never know.
That's what I keep saying to you. We've just got to turn up. Hopefully, we finish top 4. That'd be great. And turn up the first week and win a game and win the prelim.
Well, the thing is, see, if in the first round of the finals, if either Penrith or the Storm lose, they can't play each other in the grand final, can they?
No, No, well, if they finish 1 or 2.
So
Definitely.
that's the way you look at it. So someone could upset one of those in the first round, and if they do, then whoever gets to the grand final against the other one, it's got to have a lucky day. You never know; it might happen.
You never know. There's been upsets in grand finals before.
Well, try 1969.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, at 1969, we used to have at the golf club at Moore Park. We had all these rabid South Sydney supporters. Used to sit at the back of in the little room out the back there, and they used to talk football and say how wonderful South Sydney was and whatever. And in the 69 grand final, and Balmain upset them. They all went over there to watch the grand final. They all came back, and of course the sarcastic people in the golf club got a bunny rabbit and hung a noose around its neck and hung it over the door. So they had to walk. They had to walk in through past the bunny that was hanging from the door.
Oh, that's so mean.
But they did it. But these guys were so into South Sydney, it was unbelievable. You know, you couldn't talk about any other body team but South Sydney.
Oh,
they were unbelievable.
Well, they deserved it then.
Everybody else thought, we'll get them. And they gave it to them. And then, of course, South won the next 2 years after that.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's okay. All right. Well,
we'll leave it on that note, eh?
I think so. I think with hanging a bunny off a noose is probably.
I always remember that. That was so funny.
All right. Thanks, Dad. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, mate. Bye-bye then.
Bye.